Yep, started.
Sweet. So, welcome to DF103, Intro to Palo. So this is just going to be a pretty basic intro to Palo, and my demo might not actually work properly. Our Palos in IALab, their license expired, and I talked to Cloudman, and he's getting the newer version with a new license. But since the license expired, it's being a little bit temperamental and does not like being alive. So, yeah, hopefully the demo is going to work. It was working like an hour ago, and I just tested it, and it worked, but yeah, just a little disclaimer. However, they do work to a point, so a little bit weird. Okay, so intro to Palo. Palo Alto Networks is a company founded in 2005. It's a security company. They offer firewalls, kind of big company, lots of money. Yeah, basically they offer one product that we care about, which is their firewalls, and PanOS, specifically an operating system that is the firewall operating system. So yeah, kind of cool. Let's see, so why do we use Palo? Mainly because just CCDC uses Palo, so we use Palo. Also, they're an industry leader, lots of big companies, big company, yay, lots of, I don't know, yeah. So we use it because CCDC uses it. Also, it's cool and does stuff. So why is it cool? So Palo is a next generation firewall. Palo and PanOS and Palo Alto OS are all synonymous. Technically, it's PA something or another. I don't know. Doesn't matter. We call it Apollo. So it's a next generation firewall. What's that mean? So a lot of firewalls, like pfSense or even your client firewalls, filter on layer 3, which means that they can see an IP address, they can see a port of where something's going to and from, but that's pretty much all they see. They know that port 22 is allowed from one IP address to another. They don't really know what's happening on that port 22. So as you might be aware, you can run services on non-standard ports. So for example, in a standard pfSense firewall, if you have a rule allowing traffic on port 80 into and out of your network, because you have a web server hosted or something, then that's great, except if someone gets control of your web server and then shuts down your website and starts up SSH on port 80, then they can just SSH right into your server. The firewall just sees that traffic as, oh, hey, this traffic's coming in on port 80, it's okay. So a next generation firewall is super fancy. It can do packet inspection beyond that just source port, destination port. So it can do things like filter based on the actual type of traffic. So it could only allow SSH on port 22, or it could block FTP everywhere. It could only allow HTTP on a certain port. So it adds a lot more control and a lot better security. You can, when you allow something like port 80, you can allow specifically HTTP and only HTTP on port 80, which means that if they do some stuff, shut down your server and start an SSH server, or for external rules going outbound, if they're trying to SSH into their server on port 80 to get some callback, then it's not going to work. Only allows HTTP, or you could do HTTPS. Another fancy thing that they have is it can decrypt HTTPS. So it can go from HTTPS to HTTP inside the firewall, and then it can read it. You have to set that up a little bit complicated there. You basically have to copy encryption keys over from the Palo to everyone's client box. And I'm not going to be going into that today because that gets a little bit complicated. But it can see inside that traffic. And then because it can see inside that traffic and it can see just plain text HTTP and things like that, it can actually block some specific content. So it can block emails or downloads with malware in them. It can specifically target certain things like that. There is a way to block potentially PII with it. So for example, if someone's social security number was trying to exfil someone's social security number, Palo could block that. Yeah, fun stuff. So there's two ways to communicate with it, console and web interface. So first, I'm going to be setting it up on the console. So if you want to follow along, there's a VApp that was pushed out, DF103. Yeah, I powered the VApps on a while ago because one kind of annoying thing about Palo is that once you power it on, it takes like 10 minutes to actually turn on before it allows you to log in. And it just says failed login in that waiting time. So can be a little bit confusing when your password's not working and you know it's the only password. So credentials are admin and admin. Look at that. It's been long enough since it booted. Sweet. So now we're in. The configuration from command line is kind of a little bit strange. So there's different configuration modes you can be in. So right now you're just in like the normal mode. If you press tab, you can see all the commands you can do. And this is basically just a console. I forget what shell it's running, but yeah. So you can run standard commands like you could SSH into something or whatever you want to do. But if you type configure, now you're in configuration mode. So whenever you say something, it'll have this little box. That's hard to see. Little thing in braces right up there. It says edit. So that's where specifically in the config you are. So there some basic commands are show, which is going to show all of the config options that you can see right now. Or edit, which is like kind of CD. So you're basically in a config-like structure. It's a JSON-like structure. And edit is basically like CD to change your directory. So say we wanted to edit something specific, like management config, then we can do edit management config, and now we're editing in the management config area. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. So then if you want to go back up to the top, then you type top. Or if you are in management config, edit users. Oh yeah, you can't jump to a certain one. Users admin, there we go. So if you just do up, then it will go up one level. So you don't go all the way back up to the top. So using this, you can bounce around in here. Let's go back up to top. So if you want to set a value, then you can use set. So if we wanted to set the password for admin, then we do set management config users admin password. And there is tab complete. Then enter a new password. So since it's your network firewall, it's definitely good to have a really strong password. This is arguably the most important box on your network and CCDC-like environment. First or second most, other than your ESXi, but this is probably more important than that. Because if Red Team owns your network firewall, they own everything. They can just click a button and turn off your firewall, and then not a good day. Or just like click a different button and like actually turn off your firewall box, and then everything's red and you can't do anything because you don't have internet. So yeah, good thing to change password. Pick secure password. I just changed it to password 1bang on mine because that's default. But hey, pick a good password. So also you can save and load config. So kind of nice. Save config to backup, backup.xml, like that. So just save your initial state. And load state, you can also load config, and then there's some other things you can do like last saved, which, okay, so when you're changing config options, it'll like make a list of changes and then won't actually save those changes until you say commit. That's to actually push the changes. So if you do load config last saved, then that will just revert everything that you've changed since the last time you committed. So it'll basically go back to the last time you committed. So if maybe I wanted to undo that password save, then I could just be like load config last saved, and then boom, reverted that. So then once you change something, so if we go back and change that password again, and you actually want to save your changes, then you just do commit, and it'll be like loading, committing. This can sometimes take a while, so you can just click Control-C, and it doesn't actually stop it, it just puts you back to the shell. And it'll be doing that in the background, so that's basically backgrounding it. So let's see, you can do show management config users, list the users we have currently and some information about them. So right there, we only have an admin user right now. You can add more users or delete users. Maybe delete red team users, probably a good idea, if there are any. And just to show some information about the user. So right here, you can see that they are a super user. So let's see, next. So let's actually set this up. We go to top, then clear screen. You can do edit. So, okay, so it is, the config's in this like JSON-like format, and we can either specify the entire length of what we want to set. So we could do like set device config, system, IP address, whatever, 10.0.10.254. We can do that. But we have a bunch of commands here that are editing that device config system. So instead of doing that whole long command, you can just do edit device config system. And now you're like in that directory almost in the config. So then you can just use set IP addresses 10.0.10.254. Equivalent commands. But yeah, this one's a little bit less to type if you have a lot of stuff to do. So we're going to set our net mask to 255.255.255.0. We're going to set default gateway to 10.0.10.1 and set DNS settings servers primary. So 172.16.3.100 is the default IOLab DNS servers. And then in this network right here, this is same network from DF101. We have our example servers on the LAN, which is your team network. Then here's the Palo bridging between the LAN and the WAN. Then on the WAN, we have a red team Kali box, the scoring engine box, Google, just some random website that you could access, and then the actual router to the internet, so you can get updates and stuff, which just goes to DefSec lessons right now. So right there, we just set the IP addresses for this first interface. So Palo is a little bit different than like pfSense. Palo has 3 interfaces by default, or at least you need to configure it with 3 interfaces by default instead of 2. Instead of having just like one interface for WAN and one interface for LAN, and then you can talk to the management console on the LAN one, Palo has one interface for LAN, one interface for WAN, and then one interface for management. So you can always talk to the management interface, or you can always talk to the management console on the management interface. And then you can just plug the management interface into like a different network if you want it to be there, and it will act as a client on that network. Or you could like plug this, if you had an Ethernet cable, directly into your laptop, and then only you can talk to the management interface. It makes it a little bit more secure so that not every single box on the LAN can hit the management interface. So like red team, if they got on your LAN and you didn't have this management interface plugged in, they wouldn't be able to hit the management interface without you specifically allowing them to do that in the firewall rules. So kind of nice, super nice for a like fallback. If your rules die, then you can just like plug your laptop in, and also this makes it so that you don't have to expose your management interface to any bad networks or potentially to red team. So ran that, it let's see, yeah. So I set DNS servers. So then I want to edit the network interfaces. So I'm going to go back to top of the config and then edit network interface. So here we have currently no interfaces set up. They're plugged in, but they aren't configured. The interfaces start from the second interface. So the first one's the management interface. The second interface is Ethernet 1/1. And then the third is Ethernet 1/2. So like if this one's ID 0, then this one's ID 1. Kind of makes sense. So we can do set Ethernet 1/1 layer 3. So Palo can act on layer 3 or layer 2. Layer 3 means that it actually gets an IP address and can like route traffic properly. With that, you could do NAT configurations and stuff like that on the Palo. Layer 2 is basically if you want to put the Palo in the middle of an Ethernet cable and want it to be mostly invisible to the network topology. So you don't want to like have to create a new subnet for the Palo and new subnet and have the Palo route between them and have a bunch of different networks. You can just put Palo on as layer 2 on a cable. Yeah, I did not explain that good. Basically allows it to block traffic without actually having to do all of the routing. Well, it still has to route, but it doesn't have to do like network to another network. So here we can set the IP address for certain interface. So if we want to set the IP address for Ethernet 1/1, then we can do that. And set the IP address for Ethernet 1/2, layer 3 IP 10.0.10.1/24. All right, so we just did all those changes, but they aren't actually committed yet, so nothing changed on the Palo yet. So you have to actually do commit, and it's going to push those changes. It'll take a few seconds. However, assuming that I actually did that right and didn't spell anything wrong, then we should be able to hop onto this other box, server 1, it's DSU password 1 bang. And if we open up the web browser here, you should be able to connect to 10.0.10.254, which was the IP address I set for the management interface. Uh-oh, I might have broke this. There we go. I was doing it on HTTP. It has to be HTTPS because it's secure. There we go. Look at that. So it's going to complain that the certificate's not allowed because it's a self-signed certificate, but yeah, you can just click accept. So admin, and then whatever password you set. Uh-oh. Oh, hey, look at that. So this is the web interface for Palo. Oh boy. It is not going very quickly. So it's going to have a bunch of angry pop-ups. One of them is this one complaining about the license. So license expired recently, and Cloudman is working on getting us one with the updated license. So yeah, it's a little bit temperamental. Everything's expired. Very unhappy. However, here we are. Now we are in the interface. So on the left here, you can go down to, oh boy, that is some small font. So if you go to administrators, then right here you can see admin. There's that user that we're on. You can change things about them, add more administrators. There's also down here, users. So you can add more users if you want. These users are for if you want to set up like a sign-on portal for using internet access, which is kind of cool. And back to administrators. So good idea to check here and see if there is red team users, because if red team gets on here, they probably aren't going to change your password immediately. They'll just add a bunch of users. And you can also add users if you want to add like a backup user in case red team changes your main user password, though you would hope that red team never gets onto your firewall. So let's see what's next. Oh yeah, so right now we can hit the web interface, but maybe. Oh boy, this is running slow today. So if we want to ping that, we should also be able to ping the web interface. But we can't ping 10.1, which is the IP address that we set for, that's the IP address that we set for this one, interface 2, which is also on our LAN network. So we can't ping that. So if we wanted to allow ping to that, and right over here we can do set profiles. This is probably not going to work because I can't spell. So we have to do top set profiles interface. Okay, I definitely spelled something wrong. Management. Uh-oh. That's awkward. Interface management profile. Pingable. Okay. We'll try doing this from the interface instead because I can't spell. So I was hoping to have that. Okay, so right here we have, that's not the right one. There we go, interfaces. So here's those interfaces again, but this time graphically, whoa. So you can see Ethernet 1.1 and Ethernet 1.2, they're both layer 3. Those are the IP addresses we have configured for them right now. So if we want to actually be able to ping them, then we need to set a management interface for them. The GUI interface is a little bit slow sometimes. Also might be I didn't give the box a lot of resources, so it's kind of slow. So right here we can, if you just click on the name of it, you get the settings for it. So we can go around, set IP address if we wanted to. So if we wanted to change the IP address, set different config options here. So right now we're going to set this management profile, but there's no management profile, so we actually need to create one first. So go to interface management, then you can add a new one. So ping, add ping, then okay. So adding a pingable management interface basically means that now pops up nice. Now we should be able to ping that interface, assuming that I actually spelled all that right. We should be able to ping that interface and talk to it. So this is allowing, previously this management interface was the only way that we could talk to the management console or talk to the actual Palo Alto. But adding the pingable management interface means that now on this port we can talk to the Palo Alto. Instead of just routing traffic through, it'll now actually be able to talk to the Palo Alto. So let's see if that worked. Nope, that didn't work. Did I spell that wrong? I probably spelled something wrong. Oh yeah, okay, it's very mad, right? That's not gonna work quite yet because we actually need to finish setting up the interface. So it yelled at me when I tried to commit. So we need to add virtual router. Okay, so virtual routers, that's how traffic actually moves through the Palo. So when you just plug two different networks into it, Palo doesn't really know what to do between those two networks, doesn't know how to move traffic between them. So you need to make a virtual router, or there's one called default that's there by default. So if you click on default, maybe, there we go, then you can add different interfaces to it. So if we wanted to add interface 1 and interface 2, now both of those interfaces should be on the same like virtual router, and packets should be able to route through them now. We're going to also add a static route. Default. So this is going to be to 10.0.0.1, which is our upstream router. On the interface Ethernet 1.1, 10.0.0.1 on Ethernet 1.1, and then next hop. Oh no, I did that backwards. Interface being very slow. Destination 0.0.0.0 slant 0. There we go. Haha, now I did that right. So this is saying that all traffic, this is just adding the default route. You need to actually add it in Palo. So this is saying that all the traffic, if the Palo doesn't know what network it belongs to, it's just going to send it upstream to the upstream router. I'll explain that a little bit more in a sec. So, okay, yeah, so now we have this. So, by default, Palo doesn't really know what to do. It has two interfaces plugged into it. Adding a virtual router says that traffic from this interface, Ethernet 1.2, can be routed to this interface now. Otherwise, Palo just wouldn't route between those two interfaces. It's a little bit more hands-on than like pfSense, which is just allows it by default. It's like, hey, traffic can route, yay. I mean, firewall rules don't allow everything, but by default, pfSense just routes stuff. Palo, you might want to do something more complicated where you have like only certain interfaces are allowed to talk to each other and stuff. Yeah, so much more complicated, much more stuff to do. So that adds default virtual router to both of these. Next thing we need to do is add a zone. So in Palo, there's zoning, which kind of allows you to categorize different interfaces. So if you had like another thing plugged in here, another interface plugged in here on another LAN network, so say you had second LAN network for your team, you could have both of them plugged in two different interfaces, but you might not necessarily want to write all new firewall rules for each of those interfaces like you'd have to do on pfSense. Zoning allows you to say that both of those two are the same zone. And then you can allow stuff from that zone to another zone. So we're going to add a zone. We're going to call the first one LAN. We're going to add interfaces to it. Why aren't you happy? I'm really not happy. What? Okay. Come on. Is not being happy today. Interface does occasionally glitch out some. Yeah, okay, we know. Thank you for the annoying pop-up. Yes, we know the license expired. Yes, we know the license expired. Okay, as I was saying, let's see if it's going to work this time. LAN. Hey, there we go. Now it's not yelling at me as much. So also add a WAN interface. Boom. There we go. Now we have LAN and WAN. And we go to interfaces and Ethernet 1.2, which is our LAN interface. Then for security zone, we can add it to LAN. What? Why doesn't it? Oh, haha, I can't spell. No. LAN. Really? Did I not add those right? Nope, they are both added. Okay, it is being not happy with me today. Okay. Palo is not happy today. All right. As I said, sometimes it's a little bit buggy. This is a new spot for it to be glitching, though. Normally it starts glitching when you actually want it to start routing things. Huh, okay. That time it allowed me to do it. All right, you're supposed to create the zone before, like in the actual zones tab, and then assign it here. But I guess it does not like me doing that today. Okay, so now they each have a security zone on them. So WAN and LAN, that's going to allow us to actually make firewall rules that control what traffic can flow between these. So we're going to commit that. Good to save changes. There's your commit button, and then you can click close if you want to background this. That's the same as just doing Control-C on command line. Okay, so now we have almost everything set up. Now, is it going to be happy and work with us? Hey, look at that. Now we can ping that first interface because it added the pingable management profile to it. So, let's see, next. Yeah, don't have anything. Okay. So now, interface glitch. Okay, so now we can go over here to policies. Policies, this is just basically our basic firewall rules. So right here we can see we have two rules set up. The first one's intrazone and the second one's interzone. And intrazone is allow, so that basically says that anything in the same zone is allowed. And interzone is denied. So anything from one zone to another zone is denied. Basically, if you have two different interfaces in the same zone, this first rule is going to allow stuff from one zone, from one of those two zones to the other. But the second rule blocks stuff that's going from one of those two zones to a different zone. Kind of makes sense. You'd want stuff in the same zone to be able to talk to itself. So if you click down here to add, that's going to add a new rule. Name, allow all. Okay, so just like any other firewall, you can do source and destination. So we're going to just do a basic allow all rule. Hope it actually works this time. And destination, any. All right, so that is just going a simple allow all rule. It's going from any address to any address, any, like all any. So that's just basic allow all. But, oh boy, it is slow. Okay, but you probably wouldn't want an allow all rule. So you'd want to actually filter it. So you can't just directly add a port. Like in most other firewalls, there's no option here to just be like, I want to allow port 22. The only option is the applications tab. Well, not the only option, but the option to change the port is the application tab. So instead of just being able to allow port 22, you have to actually allow SSH as an application. So a lot fancier, a lot more complicated. If we do this, and I want to rename this to allow SSH. Right here. So now it's same any, except application is SSH. So that's going to allow SSH on the default SSH port anywhere. This is a lot different than other firewalls like pfSense where you have to allow the port, but it's any application. This is allowing the application on its default port. So in order, generally, you're not going to need to change the ports. For CCDC, it's, for the most part, standard ports. I don't think, I don't remember any time recently when it was non-standard ports. Actually, I think that the last time we had one non-standard web service. Didn't we? Maybe we did. I'm not sure.
Like 2 weird things, yeah.
Yeah, there was like maybe one non-standard web service. But for the most part, things are going to be on their standard ports, so you shouldn't have to deal with that too much. I'll go over that in the next Palo one, how to get more complicated applications. But like this, it just allows SSH on any port. So I'm going to also allow just another allow all rule. Allow all, any source, any destination, and wow. Hopefully it's actually going to work this time. I was having quite a few problems getting this to actually work before. And I'm talked to Cloudman, and we think that it has to do with the licensing, that they're just like bork the firewall when the license dies. Because I mean, you shouldn't be able to use your unlicensed stuff. So, is it? Yeah, nope, still dead. Okay, but we should be able to now ping 10.0.0.10. Nope. Okay. Yeah, it still hates me. I'm not sure why. That shouldn't be one of the rules I have, because I also tested this on a different Palo that we have that was configured correctly, and it was also not wanting to route today. So I'm pretty sure that that has to do with the licenses expiring. Yeah. What? Yeah, yeah. The license expires, and they're like, no firewall for you. So I'm not 100% sure that it's that, but I think it's that. However, yeah. Are there any questions? I think that I covered most stuff. No opinion, no questions, nothing.
Hey, Galen, is there an interface for manipulating the settings for an application or even adding new applications? I'd be interested to see if there's ways to define that.
Yes, there is. I am not good at that, not gonna lie. So far I have only had a lot of experience doing the basic, just adding, right here, just adding the basic version of it. I know that there is a way, and I have done it in the past, but I do not remember where to do that. You have to, basically you have to specify a new application. I don't remember where that is. Yeah.
Okay. So if I understand correctly, the application is going to be looking at a higher level inside the packet data.
Yeah. So
to verify that this is in fact SSH traffic, for example.
Yeah. Instead of just being like, hey, there's traffic on port 22, it's going to be like, hey, this traffic is actually SSH traffic. It looks at the type of traffic it is and can identify if it's SSH traffic or not SSH traffic, or
yeah. You can set up customized for easily. I did one for CCDC last year that fingerprinted dicta.
yeah.
Instantly for it.
Any other questions? I know that was kind of fast and lots of stuff, and it didn't end up working, but hopefully for the next one, we'll actually have a working Palo that has the right license and an up-to-date version. This one was last updated, I think, in February, possibly January, when this VM was updated. So, yeah, hopefully we'll have a working version for the next one, and then rules will actually work, and the firewall won't just want to die. False? Okay. Yeah, it is 2020. However, software. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have today. Yeah, I talked about zones. Web GUI hell, yes. Yeah, that's all I have for today. So if there's no more questions, then have a great break or enjoy my plentiful screenshots of all the checkboxes.
Thanks.
Cool. Okay.